Well, good afternoon and welcome back. You know, there's a great piece that will be at Substack very shortly, and it will be entitled, "Can the World Abide Israel?" It's a great piece. Can we continue to? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, according to this piece, there is no intellectually honest denial that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a campaign of genocidal ethnic cleansing. Why is this settler colonial Zionist government in occupied Palestine being allowed to do this? My guest is an independent journalist whose work can be found at Substack and thepolemicist.net. And again, his piece that will soon be published is entitled, "Can the World Abide Israel?" He is Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. As always, Jim, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Wilmer. Always a pleasure.
So before we get to this piece, there's a story that I wanted to get your take on. The BBC reports Kremlin calls Trump, quote unquote, emotional after U.S. president says Putin is crazy. Jim, Trump told us on the campaign trail that he could solve the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours. We're now more than 100 plus days past 24 hours. The Kremlin claimed that Trump was showing signs of emotional overload after he called Putin absolutely crazy following Moscow's largest assault on Ukraine. The U.S. president said on Truth Social this past Sunday that, quote, something has happened to Putin, end quote, after Russia killed 13 in Ukraine with 367 drones and missiles. Quote, he's gone absolutely crazy, needlessly killing a lot of people, end quote. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesman, said the comments were connected to an emotional overload of everyone involved, end quote. Jim, Vladimir Putin may be a lot of things, but the one thing I've seen in this conflict is Putin has been nothing but consistent. And I believe that Trump thought the same thing Biden thought, and Trump is making the same mistake. Trump came into this thinking he could bully, cajole, or bluff Putin off his spot, since we're in the NBA playoffs, we'll use some basketball terminology, that he could bluff him off his spot. And that's not happening. Trump armed Ukraine during his first term, and now he thinks he can fake or control Putin. Not going to happen. Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, is Trump over emotional? Is Putin crazy? The person who's not crazy in this is Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, Sergei Lavrov, these guys are professional, disciplined, on message. Putin, as you say, has been consistent about this since the beginning. He laid down the conditions that the objectives of the special military operation in last June. He laid down the conditions for settlement that he considers necessary. He's been consistent about that. As you say, the Trump administration, like the Biden administration, thought they could bluff and bully him out of his position or cajole him in some way. The difference with Trump is that Trump and this is part of the problem I'll get into in another article I'm going to do about, but Trump really thought that his personality in some way was going to be the key to this, because he's such a stronger, tougher, more pleasant or whatever he is, more attractive guy than Biden. He was going to get Putin and Zelensky to stop this war in 24 hours. And he really thought that. I mean, you go back and look at those things. He really thought he was being honest. And if he wasn't being honest, then, this is what I have to say about Trump is inconsistent. He doesn't really understand. To think that you could end this in 24 hours is not to understand what the conflict is about. It's really not to understand it. Now, we all know now.
So elaborate on that point, because I think you're absolutely right. Folks don't get it. And because they don't get it, they keep falling into this mythology that is being promoted through the Western press.
Well, yeah, and it's a mythology about Trump that, look, Trump's first term, he wasn't a radical ruler in any way, particularly. He had his own positions, but he colored within the lines of the establishment, really, whatever people think. And he, as you say, he started sending offensive weapons to Ukraine. It was he who did that. Now, Trump is coming in now, and this is his fans, Red MAGA has to understand what Blue MAGA didn't. The guy has a certain level of mental incompetence at this point. Blue MAGA, everybody has to understand this. People, we talked about this for years on Sputnik.
Mm-hmm.
And, we weren't shrinking from saying it. I wrote in 2019, Joe Biden, you'll hold Julian Castro, and Cory Booker said it. He's got a problem. This guy. So it was known for years by the Democratic establishment, by the Democratic allied media, that Joe Biden had a mental incompetence problem, and it was getting worse and worse quickly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire Democratic establishment and the entire Democratic media hid it, and they knew it, and they hid. They're not finding it out. Jake Tapper didn't find this out last week. He knew it. He was part of the problem of aggressively hiding it and aggressively gaslighting and attacking anybody who talked about it. But the Democratic constituency who believed them, how many arguments did I have with my email chains, professors, lawyers? Oh no, what are you talking about? You're a Trumper. He's just got his, he didn't sleep well. He's got a cold. I mean, this is nonsense. But people believed it. It's not the first time either. This has happened, and it's been hidden from the public. It was hidden with same thing happened with Reagan. They were maybe capable of hiding it a little more, but I doubt they hid it from the Republican establishment and the DC establishment. So the point is, everybody is furious at the Democrats, and rightfully so. And Democratic constituents should be furious at the Democrats for hiding this, and we all know this now. But Democratic constituents have to examine themselves. How was I able to be fooled about this for so long? It was obvious. Those clips that we saw of him stumbling, they were not cheap fakes. That was obvious. The verbal absurdities, calling for the dead Congresswoman to come, that wasn't stuttering. I saw it. This is the problem of the United States political culture. The Democratic, what I call Blue MAGA, fell for this. And they allowed themselves to fall for it. Now what I'm saying to Red MAGA is, okay, Trump comes in. I didn't expect him to be this aggressively different in a certain sense, in tone and attitude than he was in his first term. But he's come in, and he's just doing things that are absurd, and that he obviously doesn't understand what he's doing. The tariffs, the Ukraine stuff. Well, this is a problem. This is the Europeans' problem. It's Zelensky's problem. Are you providing intelligence? Did you direct that? Does the American army direct the drone swarm on Moscow? 1,000 drones a few days ago? It's not. You're the president of the United States. You can't sit back and pretend you're not part of this. We've seen the Times article showed that this was directed entirely by the American military, and it still is. So he's trying to present himself as, well, and he may have personally, I want this to stop, but you can't be, what's going on in your mind if you say, oh my God, the Russians have killed 12 people in a drone strike. Oh, they're killing people. We got to end the killing. And the Israelis are killing 100 children a day, 50 children a day, and you're all for it. So you're not and you can't put yourself in this position where I'm at the one time, the United States, this was an American regime change war against Russia. That's what the Ukraine conflict was. And they failed at it. Now you're trying to say, I have nothing to do with it, but I don't want to actually stop it. I don't want to actually stop the intelligence, which is directing the missiles and the drones against Russia. And, what does this have to do with me? But everybody's, so he's not on, and the tariffs, we're going to have 50%, 145% tariffs. Oh no, it'll be 50%. I want to do 50% tariffs on Europe. Oh no, we'll drop that down. We'll put that off for a while. He doesn't understand the consequences of what he's doing, and he doesn't even understand the responsibility and the reality of his own position in these things. He thinks he's kind of outside of it when he's in the middle of it, and he's the president. The buck stops with him, and he's got to make decisions. So this is something I'm saying. Blue MAGA had a mental incompetence problem with their president and with their candidate, and Red MAGA does too. And it's becoming more and more obvious. We didn't know. He comes in, he has his program, he pushes it through aggressively. Good for him. That's what he got elected to do. Let's push it through aggressively. But then you're going, what sense does this make? It doesn't make any sense. He's deporting now a Danish a person who's been living here on a green card with a family with 4 kids. What legally? Has job, what does that have to do with anything? Forget about, deporting. Of course, there's the white, and we're going to have the white genocide, the people who are suffering from white genocide in South Africa. I mean, all of this stuff is silly. And that's the point. People have to wake up. And there is a I think that article you sent me for the American Conservative is an example of it. What are we doing in the Middle East? What are we doing in Gaza? This has nothing to do with us. A lot of the Red MAGA this isn't what we elected you for. So people have to realize, I think this is also a serious problem with Donald Trump. Just really doesn't understand what he's doing. It's not the same kind of mental incompetence as Joe Biden had.
Correct.
But do not, I beg, Red MAGA, do not get fooled. Let yourself get fooled the way Blue MAGA was fooled. And it's your fault if you do. If you can't see what's going on here, if you can't see the incoherence and the fact that he really doesn't understand what he's talking about. I'm going to end this in 24 hours. And why? The only reason I can't do that is because Putin is crazy and Zelensky is crazy. No, that's not the only reason. These are serious issues that you can't solve in 24 hours. If you don't understand that, what are you doing as president of the United States? So I'm just saying, this is becoming more and more obvious that he doesn't understand what he's doing. He didn't understand what he's doing with the tariffs. He doesn't understand what he's doing with the tariffs, and he doesn't understand really what he's doing with Ukraine. So these are important things. And I say to Red MAGA, time for you to wake up about this. We can't let what happened with, or you can if you want, but I'll be ruthless with the Democratic constituents who said, "Oh no, you knew, you should have known, you could have known. I told you, 100 people told you, 1,000 people told you." So I'm saying to Red MAGA now, I'm telling you, and it's kind of obvious, Donald Trump doesn't really understand what he's doing.
You just said that there's a difference between Donald Trump and, well, first of all, let me make the point that a year and a half before the election, a year and a half before that ridiculous debate between Joe Biden and you were on the show with me. I was saying very clearly, Joe Biden will not be the Democrats' nominee when it comes to 2004. I looked at his behavior. I looked at his numbers. I looked at the whole picture and was saying a year and a half before, this is not going to happen. Just to make that point. You just talked about the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Joe Biden's problem, getting the ideological aspects of it out of the way, because we could debate ideology all day long. Joe Biden's failings were and are physical failings. The mental decline of a man over time. Those are physical, whether we want to call it insanity, or whether we want to call it whatever medical diagnosis you want to put on it, it's a mental decline over time. Donald Trump's issues are intellectual issues. The guy just doesn't get it. And so just wanted to put that fine point on it. But with all of that being said, where are the Democrats? Because they right now are being provided the greatest opportunity to seize the moment. In fact, I've been watching some of these promotions, some of these ads from the Trump side of the equation, and I believe the simplest measure, the simplest message that the Democrats could, if you want to boil it down to the simplest idea, folks, this is a matter of right versus wrong. This is not a political, ideological conversation. This is not Democrat versus Republican. This is a matter of right versus wrong. The tariffs are wrong. And I can bring 15 economists on to explain why. His attacks on Harvard are wrong. Wrong. His attack on academia is wrong. And I can explain to a fifth grader why that's wrong. His trying to extend his tax cuts at the expense of the working class and the poor in this country is flat out wrong. And with that diatribe, am I wrong, Jim Kavanaugh?
Well, but the Democrats have a big problem because are they taking responsibility and taking account of themselves for the lies about Joe Biden? No, they're backing away from it. They're gaslighting about it. Oh, I didn't know anything. No, that's bullshit. Excuse my French. And everybody knows it's bullshit. People don't trust the Democrats. They lied about everything. Okay. What's wrong? What's more wrong? If you want to say what's right and what's wrong, then what happened in Gaza? What's happening in Gaza? The slaughter, the genocidal slaughter in Gaza, which Joe Biden supported. And they all said, oh no, he's trying his best to get a ceasefire. And the Israelis have just come out and said, Joe Biden never asked us for anything. They never asked us for a ceasefire. So nothing's more wrong than that. And the Democrats are not changing their tune on that.
Correct.
So what do they got? Tax cuts? Bush's tax cuts ran out. Obama had to extend them. He extended Bush's tax cuts. So this is everything. The Democrats have nothing to offer. And people literally despise them because of the lying that they did. And don't forget, and I'm going to say it, and nobody wants to talk about it, this COVID thing was a disaster. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of workers who were fired from their jobs, and students who were expelled from school, and doctors who lost their licenses and board certifications because they were either reluctant to get a so-called vaccine, which didn't work, didn't stop transmission, didn't stop people from getting sick, or the doctors and scientists were asking questions about it, and they were attacked and gaslit. I wrote a long article. I went to the end of the article about the vaccine mandates. And again, it was Trump who invented this, but he warp speed. He did everything that Anthony Fauci told him to do. So, but the mandates, the Republicans were smart enough to back off from that. And I wrote a long article about the mandates and how stupid and terrible and without scientific justification they were. They knew at the time that the vaccines did not stop transmission, and still they forced people to get them and threw them out of their jobs and threw them out of work. I have a video of a fire captain in Honolulu crying about how he's going to throw people out of work as firemen on the job for 15, 20 years because they won't get the damn vaccine. And I said, hey, and it was 70% of the black population, by the way, that didn't want to get the vaccine. And I said, so you're going to fire all these people from their jobs. All of these doctors who were lifelong Democrats, they were fired from their jobs. They lost their board certification, a license. I said, and the workers, 70,000, I think, healthcare workers in New York, nurses who were thrown out of their jobs. I knew a social worker in New York thrown out of her job. I said, so the next election, you're going to have one person saying, I'm proud of throwing you out of your job. Or I'll pretend I didn't do that. You talking to me? What are you talking about? I forget about that. And you're going to have another person that said, I told you that was the rule. I was against that. Whom do you think they're going to vote for? So we can't put that behind us. That's a disaster. That was a medical disaster and a political disaster for no reason whatsoever, except they wanted to support the farmer scam that the whole damn thing was. The Democrats put themselves in the position of firing people, expelling people from their jobs, attacking scientists and doctors. And what do they think the political consequences of that were going to be? If you don't think that's not had a very big effect on this, you're wrong. It has. And nobody wants to talk about it because they'll never acknowledge it. This is the point. They're not going to acknowledge that they lied about Biden and that they knew it was going on and that they did that. And they're not going to acknowledge that the vaccine mandates were a disaster and they should never have done them because they still have their identity wrapped up in, this was the best we could do it. No, it wasn't the best you could do at the time. Everybody knew they were lying. So the Democrats have nothing to offer. They don't have a program. Are they coming up with health care for everybody? Nope. They could have done that. Obama could have done it. He could have done it. No question about it. The reason we don't have universal single payer health care is because Obama and the Democrats opposed it. Look what Trump is doing to force his media, using his political pressure to get what he wants. Obama ran on that. The Democrats were elected because of that. And if he had used half the pressure that Trump is using to get what he wants, he would have gotten it. Didn't need one Republican vote. Republicans did not stop. We would now have single payer universal health care if it weren't for Obama. And that is the case. So what are the Democrats offering? They spent the last two election cycles. Oh, that's impossible. We're never going to have that. They didn't get $20 minimum wage. Are they offering that? Are they offering to stop the wars? They're doing anti-Trump rallies, which are, let's support NATO. So what do the Democrats have to offer? They don't have anything to offer. That's the problem with the Democrats.
You're absolutely right. And everything you said is defendable. We can debate. We can debate the efficacy of the vaccine. There's a lot that others with different perspectives could logically debate with you. I'm going to use three words that Obama loved to use and would be very efficacious now. Turn the page. They could come out now and say, Dr. Kavanaugh, everything you've said is right, but we don't need to rehash all of that. We need to turn the page. And Donald Trump has provided them with more than enough ammunition to say, we can turn the page. The problem they don't have anything to offer because they back the genocide in Gaza, because they back the war in Ukraine, because they backed the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline, because there are a lot of Democrats that do want to cut, if not at least minimize, Medicaid. And this is the thing that too many folks, particularly Democrats, don't get. They're so wrapped up in the anti-Trumpism that they still can't look at what are you being offered now, other than my being told he's stinky, which my dear brother Tom Porter loves to refer to him as, other than being told he's stinky, and he is, I've been asking this question since Kamala Harris got on the campaign trail. What are you offering me? And I'm not being offered anything other than I'm not him.
Trump. Yep.
Jim
Exactly.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah, that's all they have is we're not Trump. Trump. We're not the Republicans. We're not Trump. Anything is better than Trump. Anything is, as you say, they support Trump is better on whatever Trump's doing on Ukraine. I'm not sure, but at least there's a chance, and it seems to be more than a chance, that he's going to back out of Ukraine. I don't think so at the end of the day, because I think he, like all of the presidents, is really under the pressure of the deep state, and Trump is fundamentally a weak person. He'll be bullied by the deep state into doing what they want, right. Which he always did. So, but my point is that, frankly, up to this point in his presidency, Trump has been better than the Democrats. The Democrats might have had us in World War III already, so that's not trivial.
At least on Ukraine, Donald Trump has said it needs to end.
Yep.
And he has had conversations with both Zelensky and Putin saying this needs to end. The problem is he's unwilling to put to your deep state point, he's unwilling to put the pressure on the right guy to bring it to an end. He could end the genocide in Gaza.
Yep.
But he's unwilling to put the pressure on the right guy to end it.
Yeah. He still thinks somebody's going to, I'll figure out a way of doing this by talking to someone and with the force of my personality, getting them to go along with me. And it's just not, that's his nonsense.
So let's move to your piece. Let's move to or I should say the piece that you're working on.
Yeah.
You write, there is not denying that Israel has deliberately destroyed hospitals, schools, universities, civil institutions, and at least 80% of housing, has deliberately targeted and killed doctors, teachers, journalists, artists at home with their families, has deliberately targeted women and children, burning them alive in tents, and is now deliberately starving children to death because, as one Zionist activist put it, quote, you need to destroy their offspring to prevent them from creating more offspring. Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, it really is at this point impossible to deny what's going on. And anybody who's trying to do it is being dishonest or unforgivably ignorant and unforgivably self-deluded.
And intentionally ignorant, if one could be.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say unforgivably. So it's a horror. And you know what? The motif I used in writing that, you might have noticed, is like, this is the Zionist time machine. I mean, and that's one of the reasons everybody is so confused and unsettled. And what the hell is going on? Because it's as if I found myself back in the 1830s and 1840s, watching the Indians be slaughtered, the Native Americans for their scalps, to give the governor of Minnesota who put bounties on Native American scalps. It's as if I'm back in 1950 watching black men be lynched and hung for flirting with white women. It's as if I'm in Sharpeville in 1960 watching a massacre, and I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't where I belong. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I'm not supposed to be in a world that's 50 years, 100 years. That's, beyond that. Let's put that all behind us. And we're not. We're in this world where we've been put in the past. Zionism has turned back time for us. And we're standing now, watching in the middle of the Congo, while in the middle of India, while the colonialists are chopping people's hands off. I mean, you have 100 people a day, you have 50 children a day being killed, 50 children a day, 25, 50 amputations without anesthetic. They're withholding the drugs, anesthetic. That now they're withholding food. They're deliberately starving, and they don't even hide it. They talk about it. The thing you just quoted, Ben Gvir has to give, and the minister, the whatever his position is on the minister in Israel, had to give a emergency press conference to explain to his constituency and apologize for the fact that they might have to let a little bit of food in because there's so much pressure from the Western governments and the international community that if we don't let a little bit of food in, they may turn against us, as if there isn't enough to turn against them already. And you have the Israeli population with this Penn State poll, 82% support the forced expulsion of residents of Gaza. 56% support the forced expulsion of Arab citizens of Gaza. Okay? 47% believe the army should act like the biblical in Jericho, killing everybody in Gaza. So this is atavistic. We're back in prior to the end of apartheid, prior to the end of Jim Crow, prior to the end of colonialism. Okay? And how can the world put up with that? I mean, under any story, it's like we have to realize, and what we are realizing, which many people are realizing, why there is now a explicitly and totally anti-Zionist movement, not just, this is Netanyahu. Not just Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a center-right politician in Israel. This was the entire Jewish Israeli population. 82% support the forced expulsion of Gazans. 56% support the forced expulsion of Arab citizens of Israel. This is racism and colonialism. And it always was. We always were in this little corner of the world. In terms of Zionism, we allowed ourselves to pretend that we weren't put back in the time machine before colonialism was over. But it was always that. The Zionist movement was always a Jewish supremacist, therefore kind of white supremacist, a cousin of white supremacism at least, movement, which pitched itself as a colonialist movement to the major colonial power of the day, and which said, its founder said, we cannot survive without the support of the colonial power of the day, which was first of all Britain and then became the United States. And we're going to be an outpost of, we'll be Little Ulster for the British. We're going to be an outpost of white European, British, or American civilization among these people who were considered at the time, and that was the fact until the end of colonialism, until the 50s and 60s. It was okay to be colonialism. What's wrong with that? Those people don't count for anything. They're just unremarkable. Their historical mission, their existential quality is to be either our servants or to get out of the way if we want to move there, or to just, they're pests. They're barbaric pests. So that's what the general consensus of the world was. And between 1940, the end of World War II, that moment, unfortunately, between 1945 and 1950, was a moment where it was still possible in the international community, which thought of itself as, we were great because we just killed Hitler, still to have colonialism, because colonialism was still a thing. It still was a thing. It was the French were still in Algeria, killing 45,000 people a day. And so colonialism was a thing. So the idea of Jewish colonialism, Jewish supremacist colonialism over these Arabs who the British had manipulated throughout World War I and everything, because they're just Arabs. They don't mean anything. They're not real people. We are the real people. We or Americans are the real people. So that was still for a number of years possible. And that's exactly what happened. That, and the Zionists brought a paper bag with $2 million in cash to Harry Truman on his campaign train, which few people know about, but that's why Israel was, the American State Department, the American Foreign Policy Establishment was telling Truman, this is going to be terrible. This is going to come back to bite us in a big way. This isn't going to work. But he got $2 million in cash at that time, which was a lot of money. So what I'm saying is, now people are realizing Zionism is colonialism. It is Jewish supremacist, white colonialism, white supremacism. And, this is something, and it's not just an idea of that. It's a program that's been in place. You're watching how Israel was created in 1946 to 48. They went around slaughtering people like this. That's what they did, except there wasn't social media. And the veterans of the Jewish militias who did that, Yitzhak Shamir wrote a prime minister of Israel wrote an article called Terror about how terror is nothing against the principles of Judaism or Zionism, and terror is necessary for our struggle. So they were proud terrorists, called themselves that. Menachem Begin called himself the father of terrorism in the world. This is how Israel was established, and yet somehow, for 75 years, there was an aura of goodness and virtue about it. Isn't it wonderful that we have a Jewish state in the Middle East? This is a great thing. No, it's not. This is colonialist supremacism. You only have that because you killed or expelled 80% of the Arab population in 1946 to 48. Now they're trying to do exactly that in Gaza and the West Bank. They're going to kill or expel 80% of the population. And a lot of them were killed, and they're higher. This is now worse. To a certain extent, there's a higher percentage of people being killed now than there was between 46 and 48. But we're watching it. And all the great civilized countries they're completely complicit in it. The United States, this is an American-Israeli operation. This is a British-Israeli operation. This is a German-Israeli operation. And so what I'm saying is, Gaza or no Gaza, how can we live? This is like saying, oh, all right, we can live with apartheid South Africa if they just kind of leave the Bantustans alone and give some more aid to the Bantus. Or we can live with Nazi Germany if we get rid of Hitler.
A kinder, gentler.
Yeah.
If you just and so you've got President Trump sitting next to Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's talking about genocide in South Africa, and no one in the room, well, no, there was a reporter that did ask Trump, you've used the word genocide, and that's a very strong term.
Yeah.
But Ramaphosa did not seize the moment and say, how dare you?
Yeah, I mean,
sit next to me, a Black South African, and talk about genocide in South Africa. But you're not talking about Palestine. You're not talking about the real apartheid, which, by the way, was supported by Israel. Israel wound up being white South Africa's only friend before the release of Nelson Mandela.
Yep.
Ramaphosa didn't mention that.
Yep.
And he could have been as diplomatic because he's a really very, very intelligent man.
Yeah.
He could have been incredibly diplomatic, but still put Trump on call. There's a tremendous inconsistency in your argument, Mr. President. And let me point this out to you. Didn't do it.
Yeah, and the South Africans, Israel helped them develop an atomic weapon.
Which, by the way, the apartheid program in South Africa was based upon the apartheid program in the United States. Cyril Ramaphosa did not mention that.
Exactly. As was Hitler's race law.
Exactly. I want to get to
that. There was a point where that was Jim Crow was still in place in 1950s. Of course, people were being hung by trees in the 60s. So what are you talking about? So that was that. This is exact. Anybody who supports or doesn't oppose Zionism it can't call themselves anti-racist. You just can't.
And it wasn't that incredible hypocrisy was not articulated on MSNBC.
No.
It was not articulated on CNN. And of course, I'm not even really going to mention Fox because nobody would have expected them to do that.
Yeah. But
I want to connect a couple dots here and get your thought here. In your piece, and I just read this, you mentioned the Zionist activist who said, You need to destroy their offspring to prevent them from creating more offspring. With that statement, I want to go back to 2017 and Representative Stephen King, former congressman from Ohio, who said, you don't need somebody else's babies. America can't restore, quote, our civilization with somebody else's babies, end quote, and warns of a liberal effort to break down Western civilization. There's a consistent white supremacist mindset that some white supremacist dots need to be connected here. Stephen King, the congressman from Iowa, was making his statement to endorse Geert Wilders, a Dutch politician who opposes immigration, spoke out against Islam. Quote, King says Geertz understands that culture and demographics are our destiny. We can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies. Jim, I think the white supremacist settler colonial dots, as you so accurately mentioned, we can't look at what's transpiring in occupied Palestine, the white supremacist basis of it, without connecting the dots of Stephen King's language here in the United States, as he was endorsing a Dutch racist politician, Geert Wilders. This is a mindset that is incredibly prevalent, not only throughout this country, but other countries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and this is, again, the immigration policies in Europe and America over the past 15 years have been terrible. There's no question about it. It makes no sense. The other side of the coin is that you don't solve the problems of poverty in other countries by inviting everybody to come here. That just doesn't, that's silly too. So what I'm saying is, it's like many other things. There were real problems, and we really should have a debate about them and a debate. But it mixed in with that is all of this white supremacist baloney that's coming right out now. And the South African white genocide thing is the example of it. And in some ways, again, it's so ridiculous that it's, I hope, going to end up hurting them, because what are you talking about? White genocide in South Africa? It's absurd. It's like we have the Native Americans genociding white people in the United States. I mean, it's you're out of your mind. You got to look at the history of the situations. But the use of immigration as both a tool for, because look, the tremendous amount of immigration was a result of the wars that the Americans and Europeans did in the Middle East. The wars in the Middle East, what they did to Syria. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Syria, because there was a war there, because the Americans and the Israelis set up a war which destroyed the country. They destroyed Iraq. These were all Libya. They destroyed Libya. Libya was a stopgap for migrants to Europe. So they destroyed that. So we do have to look at the situation, and they were allowing an enormous number of immigrants to come in because that was their way of a release valve for them from what they were doing to those Arab societies and Muslim societies. So all of this has to be looked at. South America, well, stop attacking and sanctioning and trying to destroy Venezuela economically. Stop trying to destroy every country that attempts some kind of even mild social democratic reforms, becomes under economic and military attack from the United States. So we have to have a serious discussion of immigration. I don't believe in, I believe in open borders ultimately, but not right now. It's like, I don't believe in tipping people because that's a bad thing and people should make the money. But, right now we need to tip people. So, but this is a vehicle by which all this white supremacist crap can come in. And the South African white genocide example, but it's just, I just don't know. It's so silly, but it's so dangerous. But what look at again, it's not even credible at that level. Okay. When you start deporting people who are good citizens, if they're not even citizens, but they're good, they've been here for 20 years, they have families, they're married to Americans, their children are American, they have jobs,
they're world citizens,
they're Dutch people. You know what I mean? What are you doing? You're deporting students who come here, and as in recognition that Harvard is a great university. America has great universities. They want to come and study, and they come and study. They're not doing anything wrong. They're on green cards. They're on student visas. They write an op-ed. That has nothing to do with anything that you talked about. It's not about, these aren't Venezuelan gang members. This is just nonsense. So they don't really, again, there's really no logic or consistency about this, except you see the white stuff. It's true. The white supremacists with what pops up with South Africa, but that seems to be the only. But even that starts to break down, and you have these kind of crazy. Why are you deporting this guy? Why are you deporting this person? He's a nice. People in the community love him. They love this woman. They love this person. They're good members of our community, and they're not doing anything wrong. And they go in for a citizenship test. They've been here for years, and they get dragged off the street and thrown and sent to a prison in a third country that has nothing to do with them. I mean, so all of this, I hope, and I think, and again, you really can't look at this, even if you want to say, let's say in a non-racist way, you want to say, oh, too many immigrants coming in. If you're racist, you just want to get rid of it. But even that's not going to work because, the Hispanic population is the fastest growing population in the country anyway. You're not going to stop it. So, even if you're sincere belief and for good reasons have problems with the immigration policy, this makes no sense. Just makes no sense.
Couple of things. So Larry Hooks Jr. says, and speaking of anti-Trump, there is a popular show I watch on YouTube, and sometimes they spend 2 or 3 hours talking about how awful 4547 is, and he is awful. But to your point, Dr. Data, which he calls me, I never hear substantive data nor solutions to our issues. In fact, you've been on this show, don't know which one it is, so Larry, please tell me, a few times as a panelist. Take a wild guess. I don't know what show you're referring to. Well, to that, I'll say this, and then Jim, I'd like to get your take. Because there was somebody else who just said, O.L. Griffin said, this platform has already become echoplex. Good day. Not quite sure what that means, but O.L. Griffin, if you're saying that this has become an echo chamber, I haven't heard Cory Booker say anything that Jim Kavanaugh is saying. I haven't heard Hakeem Jeffries say anything that Jim Kavanaugh is saying. I haven't heard Kamala Harris. I haven't heard hardly anybody in the Congressional Black Caucus say anything that Dr. Jim Kavanaugh is saying. So if this has become an echoplex, well, then rightfully so, because this conversation needs to be echoed in the dominant media. I haven't heard Rachel Maddow say anything that Jim Kavanaugh is saying. I haven't heard anybody on MSNBC say any of this. So, Larry Hooks, what is the solution? Well, I say, and have said for years, the answer is in the analysis. So, Larry, if this conversation is resonating with you, what do you think? If this conversation resonates with you, what are you going to implement in your small sphere of influence? And I say small not to denigrate you in any way, shape, or form. We all have small spheres of influence. What are you doing to take this analysis forward and implement it in your sphere of influence? Because my answer is, the answer is in the analysis, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh?
Well, I got to be more pessimistic, and I take seriously what the gentleman you quoted said. What do you want to do about it? What's your answer? And yeah, okay, it's true that the answer is in the analysis, in the sense that you have to do an analysis. And this is where, I'll push back again on you saying turn the page. No, you can't turn the page until you read the page.
I was using that euphemistically.
Yeah, I understand. What I'm saying is you can't, the people who came up and wrote the book that screwed everything can't come and say, turn the page. You got to read the book that you wrote. You got to read the manual that you've been working from. What do you say about that? What responsibility do you take about that? And my point is, the Democrats they wrote half the manual, at least. They're not going to do anything about it. And the fact that they won't take responsibility and take account for it, the problem is, yes, we can do things, and we do things. Look, we're trying what we can. And that's an important thing. It's ultimately important to kind of change the minds of people, to get people to see things in a different way. As one of my mentors in literary criticism used to say, ideology is more powerful than laws. Nobody can write a law preventing people from reading books or forcing people to read books. You know what I mean? And so, really what you have to do is change the attitude and ideologies and the framework in which people see things. Because that's why I said at the beginning, what the Democratic Party did is one thing, but what the Democratic constituents did is really what's important. They fell for it. What Trump is doing is terrible, but what the Red MAGA constituents, who rightfully were pissed off at the Democrats and rightfully said, I'm not going to have anything to do with you, and I'll take my chance with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to realize I was fooled. So I'm going to blame the correct person who fooled me, but I got to find out what it was in me, what I'm carrying around that allowed me to be fooled that much. The Democratic constituency has to recognize that, and the Trump constituency is going to have to recognize it. And when you do, what's the answer? So we can all we'll agree with Jim Kavanaugh. Now we're in a ship of fools, and the media and the parties that are allied with the media, because the media is the major media now. You have these podcasts, you have these shows, so people are learning things. So what do we do now? And the fact is, and it's terrible, politically speaking, the gates are there, and you can't get past them. There's no way to form a third party that's going to have political influence in this country until laws are changed. So what you have to do, I say, and I've said, I haven't voted in presidential elections. You have to stop voting for these people and tell them, but it can't just be sitting home. I think we need a political movement which boycotts the vote. Certainly the presidential election, local elections can be, but for all kinds of reasons, and says, we're not going to play this game until at the very least you change the rules of it so that it's fair and everybody can get in, so that people can get on the ballot, so it's not dependent on billions of dollars in money, so that we have ranked choice voting, so that, et cetera. We have to have rules of the political game, because otherwise, you cannot. Everybody gets funneled into these elections, and you have the debate between Blue MAGA and Red MAGA, and that's a stupid debate as far as I'm concerned. So I've convinced everybody that's a stupid debate. What do we do now? Oh, well, have a third party. No, third party was never going to get anywhere, and it's worse than that. So unless they change the rules, so we really have to have, I think, the preliminary to a radical political movement, or at least a necessary prerequisite for it in some sense, is to change the electoral system in a way that allows people to express themselves and gain some power through it. And that is a huge task. And I don't know, I can't quite tell you how to do it.
I won't debate that with you. A couple of things. One, Larry Hooks Jr., by the way, the show he was referring to was Roland Martin. Okay, fine. I haven't been on Roland Martin in 7 years. And he says, I know the answer is in the analysis. I've been following you for 10 years. I have respect for Roland, but again, we need to bring more substantive solutions to our issues. That's what I'm doing. Okay, Larry, thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. And this now is not directed at Larry. It's directed at the body politic. If I tell you it's raining, do I also have to tell you to get an umbrella? Do I also have to tell you to put the hood on your head that's on the back of your jacket? Or can you make those assessments for yourself? If you pull into your driveway and smell something foul, something stinky, and then I tell you, oh, there's a dead skunk in your yard, do I have to tell you to get a shovel and a bag and lift the dead skunk out of the yard and put it in the bag, tie it up, and put the bag in the trash? At what point, again, because in my opinion, the analysis, the answers are in the analysis. When I tell you what the problem is, can you assess for yourself what you need to do in your own sphere of influence to alleviate the problem? Final point on this, Jim. I disagree with you that third party is impossible. I was expecting greater turnout, greater third party turnout in this election. It did not materialize. I believe had the elites seen a 15, 16, 17% third party turnout, they would have been shook. They in fact, not only would they have been shook or shaken, I think that data would have had a dramatic impact on the two primary party.
I agree with you. I agree with you. All shook up. But the fact is, you need ranked choice voting. Well, if we had ranked choice voting, then maybe.
But wait a minute. But let me one more point, and then I'll come back to you. And that is, there was too much. Well, I have to vote for one of the two primary parties. Right. If I don't, I'm wasting my vote. There was too much of that foolishness, because I believe that was an incredibly short-sighted perspective. People weren't looking at the long game. And if you were looking at the long game, and if you were disgusted with Kamala and disgusted with Trump, but you felt I have to vote for somebody, third party was your answer, because in the long game, that would have made a longer difference. Your thoughts, Jim Kavanaugh?
Oh, but what I'm saying is, if you had ranked choice voting, that would make a big difference.
You're right.
People would, and to just explain what that is, people say, well, my first choice is the Green Party or Peace and Freedom Party. My second choice is the Democrats. Then you're not your vote will go to the Democrats if the Green Party doesn't come in first. You see what I'm saying? So ranked choice voting allows that to be seen. It's precisely the point. They do not allow all of the people who are saying to themselves, I really want Medicare for all. I really want to end the wars, but I got to vote for X because of Y. No, you got to have those people be able to be seen. I'm voting for this party because they have the better programs and the better policies. And that would be possible if we had ranked choice voting. But here's the problem with the third party, the ultimate problem with that. And I'm sorry, but I got to say it. We have 50 different electoral systems in this country.
Right.
Okay? And we have 50 different counting systems. And we have electronic voting machines. And when you have electronic voting machines that are opaque, you cannot determine.
That you cannot audit.
You cannot audit them. You cannot, there's no way.
No, wait a minute. We have to be accurate. You can audit the machine. The problem is the system hasn't required Diebold and some of the other machine manufacturers. They haven't demanded and made it law that they have to be auditable.
Yeah, and it's opaque. I mean, you can. I've written about it. I've posted the videos. Everything. They show it to the election workers. It comes out with a different result, and it can't be. Joe Biden himself said it in 2020. Oh, there are election fraud. You can't determine. You can't find out about it. So what I'm saying is, and it's happened, and guarantee, and first of all, there should be no proprietary private software. Everything should be open source. Okay. Correct. So what you have with the system now is you have, we're going to have the Democrats and Republicans and the Libertarians and the Green Party, and the Libertarians and the Green Party get together. All together, they're going to get 7-8% of the vote. We're going to write the software so it takes 2% of that vote and gives it that vote for the third party, becomes a little electoral slush fund, digital slush that the software can use and allocate to whatever other party they want. Because it's always a 2 or 3% difference to swing state, right? So those are votes. If you voted, those votes can be taken from that and given to another party. And what is the Libertarians or the Greens? Oh, we only got 5%. We thought we were going to get 7%. There's not going to be any argument about that. So this is the problem we have. Until we have an electoral voting and counting system that is transparent, that the public can see, that's open source, that everybody can look at and say, I cannot see any possible way there were votes stolen and transferred from one party to another. Until we have that, and there's no reason we can't, except people want to make money off it, and except people want to keep the system going in a way that they can manipulate. So that's what I'm saying. And
I can't debate that with you. First of all, can you give me a few more minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. There's a great point here by AM, who, by the way, is a Connecting the Dots member. And so AM, thank you. And AM says, there's very few, if any, other outlets with expert analysis, expert guests, and critical thinking like Connecting the Dots. AM, who is a member, thank you very much for saying so. And I have to say, it's because of guests like Dr. Jim Kavanaugh that make, and I'm not blowing smoke here, Jim, that make the show what it is. Look, all I did was call him and invite him on the show. He decided to come on the show and is providing us with the analysis that Jim Kavanaugh engages in. So, in the jazz context, I'm the drummer, just keeping the rhythm. And every now and then I give you what Miles would call a Philly lick, and we move the music forward. So thank you, Jim Kavanaugh. And the other thing one of the things that you didn't mention, Jim, in your voting machine point is machines showing up at the precinct already loaded with votes. And this isn't some tinfoil hat with a hanger hanging out of it conspiracy theory, because we know there's plenty of evidence that you can research and find. Machines show up preloaded with votes. That happens. That's real.
Yeah.
And to your point, and I'm bringing this back up because I think it's important to reiterate that there has to be open source software. If you are able to go to a bank and put $1,000 cash in that machine and get a receipt, and then the next day you look at your bank account and say, what happened to my $1,000? It wasn't credited. And go to the bank, and they are then able to go into their systems and say, oh, it didn't go into your checking account, it went into your savings account. Mm-hmm. They can do the same thing with your vote.
Yeah.
That's not hard to figure out.
Not at all. There's no practical reason we can't have transparent voting systems that are easy to vote and hard to cheat, virtually impossible to cheat.
Right.
But they don't do it because they don't want to do it. And
correct.
This is absolutely,
we're not forcing them to do it.
Yep. And that's my point. And I think that's why if 60% of the population doesn't vote, they're a problem. That's a bigger problem than
absolutely.
If 60% of the population votes and 20% votes for, or 10% votes for third parties. They have to lose the ability to claim the legitimacy that people have to say this is illegitimate, and I'm not going to participate in it. As I say, my favorite analogy here is like sitting down at the poker table and saying, I don't know who counts the cards, who counts the chips. It's all you're going to count the chips under the table. You're going to allocate the chip, put the card, look at the cards under the table. What are you talking about? I'm not sitting down at that poker table. That's not valuing my vote, my money. That's devaluing my vote. That's an insult to my vote and my money. You want me to sit? But really, they're saying, oh, it's your duty to sit down at that table. No, it's not. It's your duty to make the table so that I can sit at it and be on it and realize I'm doing it honestly.
We are being, as Malcolm said, hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray about the validity of the American voting process, the same way we're being hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray about genocide in Gaza. The same way we're being hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray about the conflict in Ukraine. And I can go, yes. I can talk about, you get my point, Jim Cavanaugh.
Yeah, correct. I agree.
So what is it when your piece hasn't been published yet? Oh, no, but I wanted to, before I get to that, I wanted to ask you this. The piece that we're all anxiously awaiting to be published by you, could you have written that piece 3 years ago?
No. Well, I mean, I could have, but there would have been no audience for it in a certain sense. I've written it. I've written it for 10 years. But now the point is everybody does realize what Zionism is. This is not, this is Netanyahu's policy or this. This is, we understand, people have seen the horrors of this. And that's why I say the world has abided Israel. We have put up and pretended that we weren't in this time machine where we're stuck back in these between 1945 and 48 and 49. 10 years after that, it would have been impossible to do what the Zionists did in 48 because by then you had the decolonization starting and you couldn't have done it. Okay. So really Zionism enracinated itself and embedded itself and put its roots in at a time, those few years post-war, when it was still possible to do blatant colonialism. And they did it as blatant, but now they worked on ideologically for 75 years. Oh, that wasn't really colonialism. That was just, it's compensatory colonialism. It's really compensation for the Holocaust, and they deserve it. But it's not really colonialism. It's just, it's compensatory colonialism. It doesn't. So now, but because of what's happened over the last 18 months, people see what Zionism is. This is what Zionism is. It's like if people didn't have any notion, of what apartheid was, and then
they also see what it's not.
That's right. That's right.
It is not anti-Semitism. That mythology is now being exposed for the lie that it is and being debunked, Jim. Which is that's why I asked the question, could you have written this could you have published this 3 years ago? And I believe the answer is no, because the mythology, you would have been smeared with the anti-Semitism brush, and you would have been forced to wear the hair coat, as my mother would always say. And you would have been an outcast. You would have been a pariah. You may very well have been in fear for your life.
Well, I still may. I mean, the problem really is if it has an effect, if enough people read it, if it's something that has an effect on people, and if the Zionists feel like I'm changing a lot of minds, I'm going to be in trouble. And maybe even more so now, because now there is a wave of massive numbers of people throughout the world and in the United States, and young Jews in the United States who are saying, I grew up being told that this is an intrinsic part of my Judaism. No, it's not. This is colonialism. This is nothing to do with my Judaism. But for 75 years, Americans were told this is intrinsic to your Americanism. It's
Correct.
Part of being, Zionism is part of Americanism. That's why Nancy Pelosi says, oh, if this Capitol burned down, I would still be here defending Israel. That's why Bill Clinton, who was excoriated by the right wing for not going to for avoiding the draft in Vietnam could get up and say, I would pick up a gun and fight and die for Israel. And nobody said, oh, that's a little weird thing for an American president to say.
Especially one who avoided the war.
Yeah. So, but nobody says anything. So we have been, I can show you the quotes from generals of the United States Army is a Zionist army. So where did that come? So what I'm saying is that for 75 years embedded in the American consciousness has been the idea that Zionism didn't even use the word. It was just the idea of a state of Israel is something that's really good and really something that we as Americans, that's part of our American value system. No, it isn't.
Netanyahu sat there in the Oval Office and said to the then sitting president, Joe Biden, 8 months ago, you are a Zionist. You are an Irish Zionist. And Joe Biden sat there very proudly. Don't know if he was where he was. He was probably thinking about his ice cream sandwich at the time, but stuck out his hand and said, thank you very much. You are correct.
Biden said that decades ago. He said, I'm a Zionist.
Right.
So, and people, but they tried to avoid even the word Zionism and the discussion of Zionism as, the first rule of the Zionist Fight Club is don't talk about Zionism.
Don't talk about Zionism.
There were leftist websites where when you write an article, use the word Zionism, would pop up like, oh, do you sure you want to use that word? That word might offend some people. Why should that offend them? It's a political ideology. They call themselves Zionists, they're Zionists, but you kind of wanted to avoid it. People didn't want people to see and understand what Zionism is. They just wanted to think, oh, nice for the Jews that they have a home. Is that nice? Is that nice? Well, no. What does it imply? It's like, well, like for the white people, they had a home in South Africa. What? It's the same thing. And now everybody understanding it's the same thing. Nice for the white people, they had a home in South Africa. What are you talking about? Nice for the white people.
And Larry Hook says, and Larry, you're right. And it went over everybody's head.
That's right.
You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, it still is in some regards. But now the point that I was trying to make here is that now we are able to have this conversation and explain very clearly to people these two things are not the same. And when we get pushback, we're still able to say, no, the history here is evidence of the reality from whence we speak. And you trying to tell me at Harvard, you trying to tell me at University of Pennsylvania, you try to tell me at Columbia that we have to be so concerned about the sensitivities of all of our Jewish students and all that. No, because you have people in organizations such as Not in Our Name that are going to Trump Tower, that are protesting that lie. You've got students chaining themselves to the fence at Columbia saying, no, you're lying about this. And we are Jewish students, and we are here to tell you this is a lie. More of that is happening now, creating the space for conversations like this and articles such as yours.
I just saw yesterday Jewish students in, I think it was University of Oregon, going on hunger strikes in solidarity with the Palestinian children who are dying, who are being starved. This is powerful stuff. And this is the kind of thing that is going to change. I mean, absolutely. If my voice in the least bit gets 10 people to understand, yeah, Zionism is something that has to be rejected, period. Not just because of what's happening in Gaza. When this is over, however it ends, even if Israel's forced out of Gaza tomorrow for some, but I think it's going to end badly, I think. But when it's over, we can't just sit back and say, oh, okay, now that's okay. But the Zionist state that's there is still okay. No, it's not. They want to deport all the Arab citizens of Israel. This is apartheid. This is colonialism. It's not all right.
This is a war crime.
Yeah.
It is collective punishment.
It's exactly.
Hassan, and I'm not going to try to butcher your last name, Hassan, so please forgive me. Zionism, quote unquote, the common colonial project of British royal family and Israelites, not Israelis, is by definition the worst form of colonialism, no matter if with less casualties in comparison. Well,
I don't know if it's the worst, but it's certainly
Well,
the worst we're facing right now. It's the worst.
Who wants to start comparing atrocities?
Yeah.
Right. But the point is, point well taken, point well made. So Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, when can we expect to see the publication of this piece?
I hope to finish it in the next couple of days. I have a lot of family things. I think
Gotcha. Yes.
So it's just, but I'm working on it, and it'll be out soon.
Peggy Parks Miller, thank you very much. Cherie, thank you very much. AM, thank all of you all that are members of the Connecting the Dots Club and have and contributed to the dialogue in the chat box. Thank you all very much. Those of you that are not yet members, please become. We need you. We can't do this without you. We're doing this for you, but we can't do this without you. We